The woman from the hotel sounded embarrassed when she asked whether my husband preferred the chilled champagne before or after his couple's massage. I was standing in the finance conference room at Meridian Biologic Supply, staring at a wall of numbers that represented $72 million in refrigerated inventory. It was 4:42 on a Thursday afternoon, and I had 14 minutes before a board call. "I'm sorry," I said. "Which husband?" There was a pause. "Mr. Graham Bennett. This is Carmen Bennett, correct?" My mouth went dry. Graham was supposed to be in Manhattan at a retirement planning seminar. He had kissed my forehead at 6 that morning, rolled his suitcase across our kitchen, and complained about the train Wi-Fi. "Yes," I said. "I'm Carmen." "Wonderful. We have Mr. Bennett and Ms. Hadley Pierce arriving tomorrow for the harbor renewal package. The reservation note says they are celebrating a new beginning. We wanted to confirm whether the rose petal turndown should be prepared Friday or Saturday." Hadley Pierce. I knew the name. She was an experienced design consultant who had attended Meridian's holiday gala on the arm of her husband, Julian. He was the architect overseeing our Cambridge distribution expansion. Hadley had worn a white silk suit, praised my earrings, and rested her hand on Graham's forearm when she laughed. "Friday," I heard myself say. "And the champagne?" "Before the massage." I gave the answer because my body had spent 23 years becoming useful during emergencies. When I was frightened, I found the next decision. The woman thanked me. Before she hung up, I asked which card secured the room. She read the last 4 digits of my platinum card. I sat down after the line went dead. At 4:47, my assistant, Robin, tapped on the glass. I lifted one finger. 5 minutes. Then I opened the banking app Graham and I shared. The hotel had placed a $3,860 authorization that morning. Beneath it were charges I had never noticed because they were designed to disappear inside a comfortable life: a florist in Providence, a wine store in Newport, a private car service between Boston and an address in Back Bay. The address belonged to Hadley Pierce. At 4:55, I led the board call. I explained a temperature control variance, answered the chief executive's questions, and recommended a reserve adjustment. No one heard my marriage splitting under the polished surface of my voice. Our CEO, Malcolm Stroud, ended the call by saying, "That is why Carmen is the calmest person in this building." I almost laughed. I was 46 years old. I was Meridian's chief financial officer. I could find a $6 duplication in a 10,000-line ledger. At home, however, Graham had spent years teaching me that noticing was a character flaw. If I asked why he had changed his phone code, I was controlling. If I asked about a late dinner, I was anxious. If I noticed that he had started buying shirts in colors I had never seen him wear, I was projecting stress from work. Competence, he said, was useful at the office and exhausting in a wife. That evening, he called from the Acela. "Signal's terrible," he said. Behind him, I heard the soft chime used in Northeast regional stations, not the Acela quiet car he claimed to be in. "How was the ride?" I asked. "Packed. I've got 3 client sessions tomorrow and dinner with the regional team." "Sounds busy. Don't wait up Saturday. I may take the late train." I looked at the photograph on our mantel, Graham and me outside my mother's cottage in Wellfleet, his arm around my waist, the sea grass flattened by wind. "I won't," I said. After we hung up, I did not call the hotel back. I did not text Hadley. I did not throw Graham's clothes onto the sidewalk. I photographed the card charges and changed the password on my personal banking login. Then I called Evelyn Cho. Evelyn had handled my mother's estate 6 years earlier. She was 55, compact, direct, and immune to theatrical people. "I need a divorce lawyer," I said. "Do you need a lawyer tonight?" "I think I need a lawyer before tomorrow morning." "Then come to my office at 8. I slept for perhaps 40 minutes. At dawn, I found Graham's old tablet in the drawer beneath the printer. He had stopped using it, but it still received messages from a shared photo account. I did not guess passwords or open anything marked private. I looked only at what was already displayed on the screen we both owned. A notification showed a photograph uploaded 3 days earlier. Hadley stood on the porch of my mother's house. She wore my mother's red wool shawl. I knew every dark embroidered flower along the edge. My mother, Lucia Reyes, had bought it in Oaxaca on the only trip she took after my father died. She kept it folded in the cedar chest at the foot of the cottage bed. When she was dying, she made me promise not to let anyone turn the Wellfleet house into one of those gray boxes that looks like a dentist's office. In the photograph, Hadley had wrapped the shawl around a cream sweater and raised a champagne glass toward the camera. Behind her, Graham was dragging a black contractor bag across the porch. The bag had split. A framed photograph of my mother protruded through the plastic. I enlarged the image until the pixels broke apart. It was a picture of my mother and me painting the cottage door turquoise when I was 17. Hadley's caption read, clearing the past. Making room for us. That was the moment the affair stopped being the worst thing Graham had done. The cottage was mine. My mother had bought it with overtime pay from 31 years of nursing, and her will had left it to me alone. Graham and I had spent summers there, but his name had never been on the deed. 10 years earlier, after our daughter was stillborn, I had hidden in that house for 6 weeks. My mother cooked without asking me to eat and sat beside me without asking me to speak. Graham had known what those rooms held. He had taken another woman there anyway. And together, they had put my history in a trash bag. At Evelyn's office, I placed my phone on her desk and showed her the photograph. She looked at it once. The affair matters emotionally, she said. The bag may matter legally. Do you have a current inventory of the property? Not a formal one. Who has keys? Graham and me. The caretaker has one. Any cameras? A doorbell camera. Graham said the salt air ruined it last winter. Evelyn's eyes moved to mine. Did you verify that? I felt the old reflex rise. The shame of having trusted my husband. No good, she said. Do not waste energy blaming the witness. We examine the person who acted. She brought in Tessa Moran, a family law partner with silver curls and the voice of someone who never confused volume with authority. Tessa explained preservation notices, account records, and the difference between gathering what I legally could access and breaking into what I could not. You are going to want a confrontation, she said. Wait until we know what you would be interrupting. The words felt unbearable. They also felt correct. By noon, we knew Graham's affair was at least 9 months old. The florist charges aligned with weekends he had called conferences. The car service had made 7 trips to Hadley's building. A storage company billed our joint card every month for a unit in Quincy. Graham had also transferred $18,000 from our joint savings into an account labeled Tidemark Renewal Group. I searched the Massachusetts corporate registry. Tidemark Renewal Group LLC had been formed 11 months earlier. Its manager was Graham Bennett. Its business address was the Quincy storage facility. The registered purpose was hospitality development. At 1:15, the caretaker in Wellfleet returned my call. Mrs. Almeida had known my mother for 20 years. She did not waste greetings. Carmen, I have been trying to decide whether to bother you. Tell me. Graham has been bringing a blonde woman down. They say they are preparing the house for you. She has samples, blueprints, all kinds of things. How many times? 6 weekends I saw. Maybe more. I pressed my palm against the desk. Did they remove anything? Last Saturday, there were bags. I stopped Graham because I saw Lucia's yellow mixing bowl. He said you wanted everything donated. I didn't. Mrs. Almeida inhaled sharply. I kept the bags. I closed my eyes. Where? My garage. I could hear your mother swearing at me if I let that bowl go. For the first time since the hotel call, something inside me loosened. Thank you. There is more, she said. A surveyor came Tuesday. He put orange stakes along the back lot. Graham told me you were building guest cottages. I had never authorized a survey. After the call, Evelyn ran a property search. There was no recorded mortgage, lien, or transfer. Tessa told me that was reassuring. Evelyn did not look reassured. Recorded is not the same as attempted, she said. At 2:30, I called Julian Pierce. He answered on the 4th ring. Carmen? Is this about the Cambridge project? No. Are you somewhere private? I can be. I heard a door close. Julian was 42, a black architect with a careful manner and a reputation for turning ugly industrial buildings into places people wanted to enter. We had met perhaps 8 times. I knew he had designed Meridian's expansion. I knew his wife laughed loudly and made other people feel slightly underdressed. I did not know how to tell him his life had also changed at 4:42 the previous afternoon. A hotel called me about a reservation for Graham and Hadley, I said. They are supposed to arrive in Newport tomorrow. Silence. Then, say the names again. I did. No, he said, but it was not denial. It was pain trying to negotiate. I sent him the reservation charge and the photograph from the cottage. He stayed on the phone while he opened them. That is your house? My mother left it to me. Graham told me it belonged to both of you. The air changed. Why did he tell you anything about it? Julian did not answer immediately. 6 months ago, Hadley asked me to look at a coastal property. She said a friend wanted to convert it into an executive wellness retreat. I reviewed the zoning and sketched a preliminary site plan as a favor. Graham was the friend. Were you at the cottage? Once. Graham let me in. He said you were excited about the project but buried in an acquisition. I remembered that day. Graham had brought me soup at the office and told me he wished I knew how to slow down. What did you design? For detached suites, a glass pavilion, and a service drive. I told them conservation restrictions would make most of it difficult. Graham said financing was scheduled and the land value gave them room. What financing? He did not say. Julian's voice became distant. Hadley has a title company appointment on Monday. She said it was for a hotel client. Evelyn wrote something on a legal pad and turned it toward me. Ask for the company. Which title company? Julian gave me the name. Evelyn was already dialing when I hung up. The title company would not discuss a transaction with us until Evelyn supplied proof that she represented the owner. 27 minutes later, an attorney named Sarah Velez called back. Her voice was cautious. We have a closing package under review for 18 Gull Point Road, she said. The borrower is Tidemark Renewal Group LLC. The collateral includes that address. I own 18 Gull Point Road, I said. Our file contains a spousal consent and limited guarantee signed by Carmen Reyes Bennett. I signed nothing. Another pause. The signature was notarized. It was not signed by me. The proposed loan was $640,000. The closing was Monday morning. Sarah froze the file before we ended the call. At 3:38, she sent Evelyn a copy of the guarantee and mortgage authorization. My name appeared 11 times. The signature looked convincing because Graham had watched me sign our lives for 23 years. He knew I looped the bottom of the sea. He knew the R in Reyes leaned backward when I was tired. He had copied my driver's license into the file. He had included our tax returns. He had attached a photograph of himself and me on the cottage porch as proof of a stable family investment. At the bottom of the authorization, beneath a signature I had never made, was a sentence declaring that I knowingly pledged my separate inheritance to support my husband's company. I read it twice. He did not just betray me, I said. He tried to make me certify the betrayal. Evelyn closed the document. And now we can prove it. That night, Julian came to Tessa's office carrying a laptop and a banker's box. He had found $37,500 missing from the savings account he shared with Hadley. The money had moved in small transfers over 10 months, most of them labeled design deposit or vendor retainer. He also found a draft operating agreement for Tidemark. Graham owned 55%. Hadley owned 15%. The remaining 30% belonged to an entity called Greyhaven Partners. I knew the name. 3 years earlier, Meridian had paid Greyhaven for leadership transition consulting. Malcolm Stroud had approved the contract personally. I told myself the overlap could be coincidence. Then Julian showed me the investor presentation. The first slide displayed an artist's rendering of my mother's cottage, stripped of its turquoise door and red roof. In their place was a gray cedar facade and a black metal sign. Tidemark House Private Renewal for Executive Leaders. On the fifth slide, under Founding Client Pipeline, was Meridian Biologic Supply. Projected annual revenue, $420,000. No one at Meridian had authorized that promise. At the bottom of the slide was a note. MS to route leadership retreats after Q3 close. My chief executive's initials were MS, did you know? Julian asked. No, do you think your CEO did? I stared at the initials. I think tomorrow I start finding out. Friday morning, I went to work as if I had not spent the night reading a plan to turn my inheritance into my husband's resort. I asked Robin for every payment Meridian had made to Greyhaven, Tidemark, Graham, Hadley, or any business address associated with them. I also requested 18 months of leadership development invoices, kept the search inside the permissions of my office, and told our general counsel, Naomi Brooks, that I might have an undisclosed conflict involving a senior executive. Naomi did not ask me to soften the language. By 11, we had found $214,600 paid to a company called Renewal Coast Strategies. The invoices were bland enough to survive a quick review: succession facilitation, off-site readiness, executive resilience design. Each was under the threshold that required audit committee review. Malcolm had approved them all. Renewal Coast used the same Quincy address as Tidemark. I felt sick when I saw my own digital approval on 2 payment batches. In our system, I released groups after department leaders certified the invoices. Malcolm's certification had been the control I relied on. He had used my trust in the process as camouflage. Naomi watched me read the payments. You did not approve the vendor or attest to the services, she said. My name released the cash. Then your name is evidence, not guilt. It was the second time in 2 days that a woman had separated my responsibility from someone else's conduct. I had not realized how badly I needed to hear it. At noon, Naomi and I called Denise Callahan, the independent chair of Meridian's audit committee. We gave her only facts we could document. Denise authorized an outside investigation and instructed us to preserve records. Malcolm was not yet notified. If we confronted him before securing his email and access logs, we risked losing evidence. Again, patience became a form of action. At 1:20, the doorbell camera company confirmed that the device at the cottage was functional. Graham had not replaced the battery after changing the account notification settings. Because the house and service were in my name, I restored my access. The archive held 83 clips. I watched my husband carry cases of wine into my mother's house. I watched Hadley tape a fabric sample across the turquoise door. I watched Graham hand a surveyor an envelope. Then I found the clip that made Evelyn reach for my wrist. It was recorded the previous Saturday. Graham and Hadley stood on the porch beside 6 black contractor bags. Hadley opened the cedar chest and lifted out my mother's shawl. "This is gorgeous," she said. "Keep it," Graham answered. "Carmen never wears red." Hadley wrapped it around herself. Then Graham held up the framed photograph that had appeared through the torn bag. "What about this?" she asked. He looked at the picture of my mother and me. "Trash. We're not building a shrine to her mother." He pushed the photograph into the bag hard enough to crack the glass. For several seconds, no one in Evelyn's office spoke. I had expected deceit. I had not expected contempt performed so casually when Graham believed I could not see him. Tessa paused the video. "Do you want a minute?" "No," my voice shook. "I want a copy." "You have one." "Then I want the house secured before they reach it." The Newport Hotel confirmed Graham and Hadley had checked in early Thursday and checked out at 10:06 Friday morning. A car service receipt placed them heading toward the Cape. Mrs. Almeida saw a contractor truck near the cottage at 11. Evelyn contacted a property attorney in Barnstable County named Samuel Pike. By 12:40, he had filed notices disputing any mortgage authority and sent formal warnings to the lender, title company, surveyor, and contractor. A locksmith changed the cottage locks while a licensed security company restored the camera settings. Mrs. Almeida carried the rescued bags back into the house and waited with Samuel. Julian wanted to come. Tessa asked whether his goal was evidence or revenge. "I do not know yet," he admitted. "Know before you get in the car." He looked at me. "Were you going?" "Yes." "Then my goal is to hear the truth while someone else is in the room." We drove separately to Wellfleet. The sky was a hard, bright blue, the kind of Cape afternoon my mother would have called indecently beautiful. I arrived at 3:17 and stopped behind the contractor's truck. 2 men stood beside my mother's kitchen cabinets, which had been stacked on moving blankets in the yard. For a second, I could not breathe. The cabinets were painted pale yellow. When I was a child, my mother had let me press tiny blue handprints inside the doors. Graham knew because I had shown them to him. Samuel stood on the porch with the contractor's foreman. "They had a demolition authorization signed by your husband," he told me. "We stopped them before they removed anything else." "Can the cabinets go back?" The foreman nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." Nothing was cut. An electric SUV turned into the driveway. Graham was driving. Hadley sat beside him wearing my mother's red shawl. He saw me, the lawyer, the security car, and Julian's sedan. His face changed 4 times before he opened the door: surprise, calculation, anger, then concern. "Carmen," he said. "What happened?" That was Graham's gift. He could enter a fire holding a match and ask who smelled smoke. Hadley climbed out more slowly. She touched the shawl at her throat. Julian stood beside me. Her eyes widened. "Julian?" "Take off the shawl," I said. Graham held out one hand as if calming a stranger. "Carmen, let's not make a scene in front of workers." I looked at the yellow cabinets lying in the grass. "You hired men to tear apart my mother's kitchen." "They were beginning a renovation we have discussed for years." "We never discussed a renovation." "You said the place needed work. The roof needed shingles. That did not mean you could rip out her cabinets, throw away her photographs, or promise her land to a lender." The concern disappeared from his face. "You went through my business files. A title company sent me the document with my forged signature." Hadley looked sharply at him. "Forged?" "Do not," Graham said to her. Julian laughed once, without humor. "She is allowed to ask. She is your business partner, apparently." Hadley looked from him to me. "Julian, I can explain. Start with the hotel." She folded her arms. The shawl tightened across her shoulders. "Our marriage has been over for a long time. That is news to the man who made you tea this morning." Graham stepped toward me. "Carmen, the loan is an investment facility. The house is sitting here underused while taxes and maintenance bleed money. Tidemark gives it a future. It has a future. Mine. You come down twice a year. It could stand empty for the rest of my life and it would still not become yours." His jaw tightened. "That is exactly the problem with you. You confuse ownership with value. I saw an opportunity. You saw my signature. I saw a marriage. 23 years of partnership. Do you honestly think the law should care whose name happened to be typed on a deed?" Samuel raised his phone slightly, making clear that the conversation was being documented in accordance with local law and with everyone notified. Graham noticed. Turn that off. No, I said. He pointed at the cottage. You were letting this place rot. I gave it a future. Behind him, my mother's cabinets lay in the dirt. You gave my house to your mistress, I said. Hadley flinched. Graham did not. Hadley understands the concept. She has energy. She does not make every decision feel like an audit. There it was. Even cornered beside proof of a forged mortgage, he still wanted my competence to be the crime. I turned to Hadley. Take off my mother's shawl. She looked down at it. Graham said you were donating these things. The camera recorded him telling you to keep it after he pushed my mother's photograph into a trash bag. Color climbed into her face. She unwrapped the shawl and held it out. I did not take it. Put it on the porch. She did. Julian's eyes stayed on his wife. Did you know the house belonged only to Carmen? I knew her mother left it to her. Did you know Graham was using it as collateral? He said the legal pieces were handled. Did you ask Carmen? He said they were separating. I felt something cold settle inside me. Did he say that before or after you toasted your new beginning on my porch? Hadley's mouth opened, but no answer came. Graham moved between us. Enough. Carmen, you are hurt. I understand that. But destroying a viable business because of a personal situation would be irrational. The lender froze the loan. The title company flagged the forgery. The contractor has been notified that you had no authority. Tidemark's records are preserved. Divorce papers will be served tonight. For the first time, he looked frightened. Then he looked past me toward Julian. This is your fault. You gave her the plans. I gave my wife the plans, Julian said. She gave them to her lover. Hadley put one hand against the hood of the SUV. Her face had gone gray. I need everyone to stop. Graham turned. We are handling it. No. You are talking like the business is the only thing happening. She looked at Julian, then at Graham. I am pregnant. The wind pushed dry grass across the drive. Julian did not move. Graham's expression emptied. Hadley pressed a hand to her stomach. 9 weeks on Monday. Graham's eyes went to Julian, not to her. Is it mine? She began to cry. I do not know. His next question came immediately. Who else knows? Hadley stared at him. That is what you care about? I care about containing the damage. The phrase seemed to strike her harder than any insult could have. Julian closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked older. Were you going to tell me? I found out Monday. I was trying to figure out what to do. At a champagne weekend with him? We were supposed to make a decision. Graham cut in. This is not the place. Hadley turned on him. You said this was our place. No one answered. The cottage behind us was not theirs. The marriage beside her was no longer safe. The man she had believed was building a future had just reduced a possible child to reputational damage. I did not feel sorry for Hadley. Not then. She had known I existed. She had worn my mother's shawl while Graham bagged our photographs. But I saw the exact moment the fantasy he sold her collapsed. Tessa's process server arrived at 4:06. He handed Graham the divorce petition, a financial restraining order, and a demand to preserve every Tidemark record. Samuel gave him separate notices concerning the cottage and alleged forgery. Graham read the first page and looked at me. You prepared this before speaking to me? You prepared a $640,000 mortgage before speaking to me. He lowered his voice. You do not want to do this publicly. I did nothing here that needs hiding. Think about Meridian. Think about your position. I have. That frightened him more than the papers. Hadley reached for the passenger door. Julian shook his head. You are not riding home with me. She nodded once, wiped her face, and climbed into Graham's SUV. Graham looked at the contractor, the lawyers, the house, and me. He seemed unable to understand why none of us had returned to our assigned roles. Then he drove away. I stood in the driveway until the sound of his car disappeared. Mrs. Almeida came out of the cottage holding the cracked photograph. I am sorry, she said. I took the frame carefully. The picture is fine. Across the glass, a fracture ran directly between Graham's reflection in the porch window and my mother's face. It felt almost too obvious to be real. That evening, we put the yellow cabinets back in the kitchen. Julian worked beside the contractor without speaking. Samuel left after checking the locks. Mrs. Almeida heated fish stew for all of us and swore in Portuguese every time she found another item Graham had labeled for disposal. At 10, Julian and I sat on opposite ends of the porch steps. I keep replaying every time she said I was imagining distance, he said. He told me I was addicted to suspicion. Were you? No. I was addicted to overriding it. Julian looked toward the dark water. What happens Monday? The loan does not close. Meridian's audit committee starts interviewing people. Our lawyers trace the money. I meant to us. I understood. I do not know. He rubbed both hands over his face. The baby could be mine. Yes. And part of me wants it to be. That does not mean you want the marriage back. How do you know? Because we have both spent 2 days learning that different things can be true at once. He gave a tired laugh. You really are a finance person. Everything has columns. And if they do not balance? I looked at the cracked photograph in my lap. Then you stop pretending they do. The next week made the affair feel like the smallest circle inside a much larger diagram. Meridian's outside investigators found Malcolm Stroud's connection to Greyhaven within 48 hours. He had formed the entity through a Delaware agent and funded it with $150,000. In return for 30% of Tidemark, he had promised Graham an initial stream of Meridian executive retreats and introductions to 2 other medical companies. Renewal Coast Strategies had billed Meridian for work that was either never performed or consisted of Hadley creating materials for Tidemark. More than $200,000 of corporate money had subsidized market research, branding, furniture deposits, and legal fees for a resort planned on my land. Malcolm had kept every invoice below his personal approval ceiling. He had also scheduled a proposal to raise that ceiling at the next board meeting. When the investigators secured his messages, they found a text from Graham. Once Carmen releases the batch, we are clear. She never looks behind your sign-off. Malcolm had replied with a thumbs up. I read the exchange in a conference room with Denise and outside counsel. I did look, I said. Denise removed her glasses. And that is why we know. Malcolm was placed on administrative leave that afternoon. He called me 7 times before his access was disabled. I did not answer. On the 8th attempt, he left a voicemail. Carmen, this has been wildly mischaracterized. Graham brought me a legitimate opportunity. Your domestic issues are contaminating a business review. Call me before you do lasting damage to your career. I forwarded the recording to counsel. For years, Malcolm had praised me as disciplined, unemotional, dependable. The first time my discipline threatened him, he called it contamination. Graham used a different strategy. He sent flowers to my office with no card. He emailed a list titled Things I Accept Responsibility For. The affair appeared as item 4. The forged mortgage appeared as a misunderstanding about marital authority. My mother's belongings did not appear at all. Then he left me a voicemail from our empty house. I am not asking you to forgive me today. I am asking you not to burn down everything we built because you are angry. Tidemark can still repay the funds. Malcolm can fix the contracts. Hadley was a mistake. Come home and we can handle this privately. Hadley was no longer a new beginning. She was a mistake because she had become expensive. I saved the message for Tessa and did not respond. 3 days later, a forensic accountant named Priya Shah began tracing our finances. She was younger than me, wore neon sneakers with dark suits, and had the unnerving habit of going silent when she found something important. On her second day, she stopped tapping her keyboard. Carmen, did you authorize a life insurance policy loan last December? No, Graham borrowed $92,000 against the cash value. The electronic consent came from your home IP address. I had been at Meridian's year-end inventory count that night. By Friday, Priya documented $267,000 Graham had diverted from joint assets, insurance value, and a line of credit. Some funded Tidemark. Some paid Hadley's rent and travel. Some had disappeared into brokerage losses he never disclosed. The polished wealth advisor who lectured clients about risk had been gambling with our security and calling it entrepreneurship. Tessa filed amended financial claims. The district attorney's office received the alleged mortgage forgery referral from the lender. Graham's employer suspended him after learning he had used client-style financial projections and his professional email in Tidemark fundraising. Nothing happened dramatically. There were no handcuffs at dawn, no television cameras, no single satisfying door slamming shut. Consequences arrived as emails, hearings, access revocations, and people who had once returned Graham's calls asking their lawyers to respond instead. It was slower than revenge. It was also harder for him to charm. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Graham asked to meet. Tessa recommended a public place with cameras and advised me not to discuss settlement terms without counsel. I chose the glass atrium of my apartment building. I had moved there after learning that Graham used our marital home as the electronic address for documents bearing my false consent. He arrived in the navy coat I bought him for our 20th anniversary. He looked thinner, but he also looked carefully thinner, as if he had arranged every detail of the picture he wanted me to see. You look well, he said. Why are you here? He sat across from me. My attorney says you are seeking exclusive possession of the Boston house, reimbursement of all diverted funds, your full interest in Wellfleet, and a disproportionate share of the remaining investments. Your attorney reads accurately. You know the business losses were not intentional. The transfers were. I believed Tidemark would succeed. You also believed I should pay for it without knowing. He leaned forward. I was going to replace the money after the first season. With revenue Malcolm illegally promised from my employer. The company needed retreats. Malcolm was going to provide them. Everyone would have benefited. My mother's house would have been collateral. Temporarily. I studied his face. For 23 years, I had translated Graham into a kinder language. Secretive became private. Dismissive became stressed. Entitled became ambitious. Even now he was offering me new words. Stolen became borrowed, forged became practical, corrupted became mutually beneficial. I stopped translating. You threw away her photograph, I said. His eyes shifted. We were clearing clutter. You looked at a picture of my mother and me and said, trash. I was frustrated. That house has controlled our schedule and money for years. You spent more on Hadley in 9 months than the cottage cost us in 6 years. He sat back. This is exactly what I mean. You reduce a marriage to a spreadsheet. No. A spreadsheet is where you hid from the marriage. For the first time, he had no quick answer. Then his face softened. Carmen, we lost a child. We never recovered. You went back to work and became impossible to reach. Hadley made me feel. I raised one hand. Do not use our daughter as a hallway to your excuse. The words came from somewhere deeper than anger. I grieved too, he said. Yes. And then you took the woman you were sleeping with into the rooms where I survived that grief. You put my mother's things in garbage bags. You used our worst loss as an explanation for violating the only place that helped me live through it. People crossed the atrium behind him. A delivery driver balanced 3 paper bags. A little boy dragged a red mitten along the glass. The ordinary world continued. Graham lowered his voice. I loved you. I believe you loved being trusted by me. He looked wounded, and part of me reacted automatically. I wanted to make the sentence gentler so he could tolerate it. I let it remain true instead. What happened with Hadley? I asked. Nothing. It is over. Did she end it or did you? Does that matter? It did not. His irritation told me enough. He stood. When you calm down, you are going to realize the prosecutors and the board do not care about you. They are using you to protect themselves. I am the only person who knows the whole of your life. You knew it, I said. That is what made your choices worse. He waited for me to stop him. I did not. At Meridian, the audit committee investigation lasted 4 months. Malcolm resigned before the board could terminate him. The company clawed back incentive compensation, referred its findings to federal and state authorities, and sued Greyhaven and Tidemark to recover the improper payments. Renewal Coast repaid part of the money from funds frozen during the investigation. Insurance covered another portion. Malcolm's public statement described differences regarding an entrepreneurial investment. Meridian's complaint described false invoices, concealed ownership, and breach of fiduciary duty. Documents have less vanity than people. They use smaller words. The board offered me the interim chief executive role. I declined. Denise blinked at me across the conference table. You have been doing half the job for months. That is why I know I do not want the other half. Are you leaving? Not yet. I stayed long enough to rebuild the controls Malcolm had exploited. We lowered approval thresholds, required independent ownership checks for new vendors, separated invoice certification from payment release, and created a direct reporting channel to the audit committee. I also insisted that the final report stayed exactly where the old system failed. Not a control lapse. Not an isolated judgment issue. A chief executive concealed a financial interest and used subordinate trust to approve payments to his own venture. Some directors wanted softer language. I did not. For most of my career, I had believed precision was useful because it prevented mistakes. Now I understood it could also prevent powerful people from editing their behavior into innocence. The divorce took 14 months. Graham challenged the forensic accounting, disputed the valuation of his company interest, and claimed some transfers were gifts I had implicitly approved. Priya answered him with dates, account histories, and his own messages. Tessa answered him with the law. I answered only when my answer was required. The mortgage on the cottage never recorded. The lender formally withdrew the application and confirmed my signature was unauthorized. The notary whose seal appeared on the documents admitted Graham had brought a photocopy of my license and claimed I was joining by video. There had been no video. Graham eventually pleaded guilty to charges related to the forged property documents and falsified loan package. He avoided a long prison sentence, but not a felony record, home confinement, probation, and restitution. His professional licenses were suspended. His firm dismissed him. The court ordered him to reimburse the marital estate for the diverted assets and pay my legal and forensic fees tied to the fraud. I did not attend the plea hearing. Tessa offered to tell me what he said in court. Did it change the money? I asked. No. Did it change the record? No. Then I do not need it. She smiled. I remember when you needed every piece of information. I needed information about my life. His performance is no longer part of it. Hadley cooperated with the corporate investigation and the property case. The evidence supported her claim that she had not known Graham forged my signature. It also showed that she knew the cottage belonged to me, knew Graham was married, took money from her shared account with Julian, and helped create false descriptions for some of the Meridian invoices. She reached a civil settlement and avoided being charged in the mortgage case. Meridian barred her from future vendor work. Her consulting business lost its largest clients after the facts became public in court filings. 6 weeks after the Wellfleet confrontation, Julian called me. The prenatal test came back, he said. I sat on the edge of my office desk. Do you want to tell me? The baby is mine. His voice broke on the last word. How are you? Relieved. Angry that I am relieved. Terrified. I want to protect a child whose mother I do not trust. Those feelings can share a room. You sound sure. I have had practice. He and Hadley went to counseling. For a while, people around them treated counseling as a prediction that the marriage would survive. Julian treated it as a place to decide honestly. They did not reconcile. Their son, Miles, was born healthy in the spring. Julian sent me a photograph of a brown hand curled around his thumb. Hadley and Julian learned to co-parent through schedules, written boundaries, and more truth than they had managed while married. Hadley sent me a letter through Tessa after the baby was born. She admitted she knew about me from the beginning. Graham had described me as cold, absent, and too devoted to my career to care where he slept. She wanted that story to be true because it let her play the woman who understood him instead of the woman helping him deceive his wife. She apologized for the cottage, the invoices, the money, and my mother's belongings. She wrote that she had not understood why Graham's treatment of my history mattered until she imagined someone discarding the few things she planned to give her son. I believed parts of the letter. I did not believe remorse erased participation. My reply was 3 sentences. Thank you for stating the truth clearly. Please practice that clarity for your son. I do not want further contact. Forgiveness was not a service I owed to people once they became articulate about the damage they caused. 9 months after Malcolm left, Meridian hired a new chief executive named Amina Farouk. On her first day, she asked the finance team to explain the controls before she proposed changing them. I liked her immediately. I stayed another year. Then, during a budget meeting on a rainy Tuesday, I realized I had finished. Not failed. Not fled. Finished. I had spent 25 years becoming indispensable to institutions that rewarded me by asking for more of the same. Graham's betrayal did not make my work meaningless. It did make me wonder why I had treated every life choice as a position I needed to defend. I gave Meridian 6 months' notice and trained my successor. Denise took me to lunch. What is the plan? She asked. I do not have one. She stared. Should I call a doctor? I laughed so hard the people at the next table looked over. I sold the Boston house and kept the apartment. I also kept the cottage. For months, I had assumed I would sell it. Every room contained a double exposure, my mother at the stove and Hadley choosing tile, Graham holding me after the hospital and Graham telling workers to remove the cabinets, my own grief beside his contempt. The easiest answer was to exchange all of it for money. Evelyn never told me what to do. A property can be an asset, a burden, a memory, or all 3, she said. Just make sure the decision belongs to you. In October, I drove to Wellfleet alone. The orange survey stakes were gone. The turquoise door had faded. Inside, the yellow cabinets were back in place, but a cabinet hung slightly crooked. I opened the cedar chest. My mother's red shawl lay on top, cleaned and folded by Mrs. Almeida. I lifted it to my face. It smelled only of wool and cedar. I had feared I would smell Hadley's perfume forever. Memory is not that obedient. I spent Saturday opening every drawer. I donated the champagne flutes Graham bought, threw away Tidemark brochures, and sorted my mother's things individually. Some were precious. Some were honestly clutter. Keeping the cottage did not require turning it into a museum. Near sunset, I removed the cracked photograph from its frame. Behind it was a note in my mother's handwriting. Carmen hated this color until she painted it herself. Then suddenly it was our blue. Children need choices they can see. I sat on the kitchen floor and laughed until I cried. Graham had used the house for less than a year. My mother had filled it for 28 years. I had grieved there, celebrated there, argued there, slept through hurricanes there, burned fish there, and learned at 17 that turquoise could become our blue if I was allowed to choose it. His betrayal did not get seniority over all of that. On Sunday, I repainted the door. Not turquoise. Deep ocean blue. Mrs. Almeida arrived halfway through and placed both hands on her hips. Your mother would say it is too dark. She is welcome to haunt me. She will. We painted the second coat together. In the spring, I started a small advisory practice called Clear Harbor Finance. I expected to consult for medical companies. Instead, my first private client was a woman going through a divorce who did not know where her husband kept their tax returns. Then came a widow who had never paid a utility bill, a nurse whose partner opened cards in her name, and a restaurant owner trying to understand a life insurance policy she had signed 15 years earlier. I helped them build account maps, check property records, read beneficiary forms, and create secure access to their own information. None of it looked glamorous. Every completed folder made someone sit a little straighter. Once a month, I held a weekend workshop at the cottage. We used the yellow kitchen table my mother found at a yard sale. There were no slogans on the walls and no lectures about manifesting wealth. We opened envelopes. We called insurers. We learned what names appeared on deeds and debts. We made coffee strong enough to offend Graham. Julian designed one small office addition facing the marsh. When I described it, he studied me. You are sure you do not want 4 guest suites? Absolutely not. Gray cedar? I will fire you. He smiled. We became friends slowly. Sometimes we discussed work. Sometimes he sent me photographs of Miles wearing hard hats at construction sites. Sometimes months passed between calls. We never dated. People who heard how we met expected romance, as if 2 betrayed spouses had to become a couple to redeem the story. But pain is not a matchmaking service. Julian needed room to become a father without mistaking responsibility for reconciliation. I needed a future that was not measured by whether another man selected me. Friendship was not an unfinished ending. It was an honest relationship, which made it new enough. 3 years after the hotel called, I woke before sunrise at the cottage. 8 folders waited in the new office for that weekend's workshop. The deep blue door needed another coat. Wind bent the beach grass until every blade pointed toward the water. At 6:51, Julian sent a video. Miles, now 2, stood in yellow rain boots and yelled at a wave for knocking over his sandcastle. The next message said, he would like to file a formal complaint against the Atlantic. I wrote back, tell him jurisdiction will be a problem. Then I made coffee and opened the drawer beside my desk. The hotel receipt was inside. I had kept it, though I no longer needed it as evidence. The woman who answered that call believed the discovery was that her husband wanted someone else. She did not yet understand that Graham had spent years training her to distrust her own observations. He had called questions insecurity, boundaries punishment, and access love. He had treated her competence as a community resource while resenting any part of it that protected her. I folded the receipt and put it back. Someone knocked. A woman in her early 60s stood outside holding a laptop bag against her chest. Her eyes moved from the blue door to the marsh and back to me. Carmen? That is me. I almost turned around. Why? My husband handled everything. I have a graduate degree, and I do not even know whether my name is on our house. I feel ridiculous. I knew that shame. It was one of the most efficient locks ever invented. Not knowing is not ridiculous, I said. Then what is it? I stepped aside and opened the door wider. The first fact we write down. She entered. Coffee was ready. The folders were labeled. My mother's shawl rested across the back of my chair, not hidden in a chest and not preserved behind glass. For most of my life, I believed strength meant holding every system together. Now I knew some systems survive only because the strongest person inside them keeps absorbing the cost. My marriage ended. Julian's marriage ended. A child arrived in a family that was complicated and still capable of loving him. A chief executive lost the authority he abused. A forged mortgage failed. A cottage meant to finance someone else's fantasy became mine again. And a life I had feared entering alone became the first one in which no one needed me to doubt what I could plainly see. If the person you trusted used your money, your memories, and even your signature to build a life with someone else, would you confront them immediately, or protect the facts first and let the truth close every exit? Red Heart, wishing health and happiness to everyone who stayed with my story until the end. Red Heart.